some don't go the way that you wanted to, right? Let's say, like, it could be sports, it could be anything, right? Have you ever taken a test where you study and you're like, you know what, I didn't really study that much, but I have a feeling that it's gonna be a piece of cake, and then you go and you take it, and at the end you fail it, right? So what happened there, right? Oh, but I study or everything, right? But you lose confidence in yourself because you didn't pass. Um, I remember that when I was in middle school, we used to have PE and run around the track. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could do a lap around the little track that we had right there. So I remember that when it was time to run, I started running really fast. And I'm like, oh yes, I'm faster than anybody. But then halfway through the track, I started to have a really bad pain right here. How many of you guys have run and you guys feel pain right here? Right? People that run, you start feeling a little right here and it starts feeling really bad and you're like, oh, why? Like, right? So that started happening to me. And next thing you know, I was like limping all the way. I'm like, oh. And I was young. I was like, what, 13 years old, 14 years old. But I started really fast and I didn't pace myself. And at the end, I was almost like the last one. And even the PE teachers are like, oh, yeah, that's not the way you do it. You got to pace yourself and stuff. But it's just simple examples that we have, right? That we overconfident ourselves and at the end, things don't go the way we want it to. And the older you get, you start noticing on other things, right? Interviews. It could be relationships. It could be a job that you're doing, right? That your boss tells you got to do this job, and then your boss comes back and you're like, hey, you didn't do it the right way, right? You didn't clean the tables the right way. Yeah, I remember when I was working at a pizza place, they told this guy, hey, go clean the tables. So he went to clean them with the towel, but he never sprayed nothing on it. And then when we got there, they were all smushed. They were all smushed. And they're like, hey, what happened here? They're like, oh, yeah, well, I cleaned them. Like, yeah, but you didn't use any disinfectant, You didn't spray any Windex at least or anything, right? Like, the stains are still there. Oh, well. I'm like, oh, well. The manager was like, I got to use very common sense. You get the rag, you wet it with warm water, then you get the spray bottle, you spray the table, and then you get the rag, you wipe it out, and then you get another rag that is dry, and you clean that up. So sometimes simple things, sometimes we overcomplicate them, right? Like sometimes little things we overcomplicate them. But we're gonna talk about something even more deeper, things that in the Bible about people that overcomplicated themselves. And let's start with Abraham. We all know Abraham, right? Let's go to Genesis, and we're gonna go to chapter 12, Genesis chapter 12, and we're gonna start from verse 10. Genesis chapter 12, verse 10. And we all know who Abraham is, right? We have an idea who Abraham is. I think by now we should have a little backstory, how important he is in the Bible. So, and I'm going to read from verse 10 to 20. And there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down to Egypt. And there, for the famine was grievous in the land, and it came to pass he was near to enter Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that art fair woman to look upon. What does that mean? Behold, now I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. What does that mean? That Abraham's wife was good looking, right? She was fair to look, means that she was attractive, And you must understand that, in Abraham's time, at least, when Abraham had, he lived in cattle and he had animals. So he didn't really have a house, he lived in tents. So the women there were always on the constant move. They didn't really have a lot of luxuries like, oh, well, let me see, I'm going to have my own room with mirrors and makeup. Like, that didn't really existed. They had maybe things to make themselves pretty, but they were limited. not according to the Egyptians. Remember, the Egyptians, who knows a little bit of the Egyptians? Ancient Egypt, right? In school, remember? They used eyeliner. So the Egyptian, if you know a little bit of the history of Egyptians were very big on being clean. They were very big on being always looking good, makeup, all that stuff. And especially the woman and the women in Egypt, they use a lot of perfumes, essence. You know, they like to keep themselves very clean. They had baths and everything. And you must understand that back then it wasn't easy to have those kind of luxuries. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something that, oh yeah, you can just go to the restroom. No, it was luxury stuff. So when we're reading, Abraham said to his wife, "Thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass that the Egyptians shall see thee, and they shall see that this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thy life." So what is Abraham saying? The Egyptians like pretty things, right? They like pretty women. And you know, and back then it wasn't like we have it now in our modern society. Back then, when you go into another country, it was like, let's see, what are you carrying? Oh, you have pretty good animals. I want them. Well, you know, either I'm gonna take them or I'm gonna kill you for them. You know, simple as that. So a lot of the people were extorted. They had no choice, so they have to sell whatever. Some people sold their daughters because to pay stuff. So it was a very different world back then. So we keep reading. So in verse 13, say, I pray thee, thou art sister, that it might be well with me for the sake, and the soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abraham came into Egypt, the Egyptians behold a woman, and she was very fair. The prince also of Pharaoh saw her and commanded her before the Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. So what happened there? That the Egyptians, of course, they notice her. And after they notice her, they're like, oh, okay, let's just take her. And let's take her to Pharaoh's house. And he ends, and verse 16, and he entered Abraham for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and asses and servants and maid servants and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with the great plagues because of Sarai, Abraham's wife. And Pharaoh called Abraham and said, what is this that thou hast done with me, unto me? Why thou tell me that she was thy wife? Why thou she is my sister? So I have taken her to me to be my wife. Now therefore, behold, thy wife, take her and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. So what happened in this little story right now that we're reading? That Abraham got scared. Abraham got scared that they were going to kill him because he heard rumors that the Egyptians, you know, if they like something, they'll kill you for it. And especially women, right? They really love pretty things. So Abraham was scared. He was all like, you know what? If I tell them that she's my wife, they're going to kill me, and they're going to take her, and she's going to become a servant in the Pharaoh's house. So I'm going to say that she's my sister so they won't kill me. But what happened? That things got worse because at the end they took her. And not only did they took her, but they were going to make her part of Pharaoh's wives. But then, of course, the Lord intervened, and the Lord sent what? Plagues unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh called on Abraham, telling him, hey, why are these plagues happening to me? And then, of course, Abraham told him that, well, she's my wife. She's not my sister. And the Pharaoh was very upset. That's why he sent them away. So what can we take from this story right here? Why did Abraham have to lie? You know, because we were saying he was scared, right? Couldn't he just pray to God and tell him, well, like, oh, God, what do I do in this situation? Right? And because the reason why he came to Egypt was because there was famine, right? He needed food. He needed to, let his animals drink water and eat pastures because there was no famine. There was no food and during that time. But why didn't Abraham pray to God? Why didn't he tell God that he was scared that they may kill him and take away his wife? Right? It's because, Abraham, what happened to him is that it happens to all of us. We overthink it and we get scared and we don't ask for God's guidance, right? And not only that, but Abraham decided to do his own plan. Not only did not pray to God, but he decided to be like, you know what, I'm going to do what I think it's right. I'm going to lie. So Abraham lied, right? He lied by saying that was his sister. And the consequences were even worse because now they were going to take her and make her permanent in Egypt. And we know that the story doesn't end there, because after the Pharaoh releases Abraham's wife, what happens? The Pharaoh gives Sarai a servant. And that servant, at the end, ends up what? Having a child with Abraham. Right? Do you guys remember? And that child's name is who? Ishmael. Remember? And what happens? That at the end, Ishmael starts growing up, and Abraham decides that Ishmael is going to be the leader. But then God intervenes because Sarai, his wife, starts getting jealous. And God tells Abraham that, no, it's not Ishmael, but Isaac. I'm going to give you a son. So what does Abraham has to do now? If you guys remember the story, he has to what? Send them away. He needs to send he needs to send his son and the servant, the Egyptian servant, away. And we know that the Ishmaelites, later on, they became a nation, and they became what? Slave traders. You know what's a slave trader, right? People that buy slaves, or they get slaves. And do you want to know how we know this? Because later on, a couple of years later, maybe a little bit more, you guys remember the story of Joseph, right? So when Joseph was thrown into the well, who bought Joseph? Slave traders. And who were those slave traders? Ishmaelites. It says in the Bible. It says in the Bible that when Joseph was thrown in the well and his brothers saw a caravan, I think it was Judah or I can't remember, was the one that mentioned, look, those are Ishmaelites, slave traders. So what does that tell us? That those slave traders were descendants of Ishmael, which Ishmael was what? The son of Abraham. So one little mistake, you see how long the consequences last? And there's other examples, but that's a big example that we come to realize, So, and of course, Abraham was not happy to let Ishmael and his wife cast him out. He wasn't happy about that because I'm pretty sure he loved his son. That was his first son. But he was not the one with the promise that God said. It was Isaac. So we know that because of that mistake, because of lying, right? And not looking for God's guidance, we know that, Abraham, they took his wife. Now, let's go to Judges. Let's go to the book of Judges. We're going to talk about another figure. Go to chapter 16. Let's go to chapter 16. Chapter 16, verse, let me see. Okay. So this story is about Samson. We all read about Samson, right? So Samson was another figure that had overconfidence in himself. Now, what is Samson known for? What do we all know Samson for? His strength, remember? He had the strength of 100 men. But he had a weakness also, you know. Now, Samson's weakness was, well, first of all, was overconfidence in himself, you know. He thought that because he was super strong, you know, he can get away with anything. But he realized that, you know, there is a danger in that, especially when it comes to, let's say, women, right? And especially not women that were part of his people. These were Philistine women, or women that were not part of his people. And we know that one of his mistakes was falling in love with a woman, right? That was not part of his people, Delilah. Now, Delilah, of course, saw an opportunity to exploit, and she decided to what? That she was gonna, you know, of course she couldn't capture him because he was super strong, but she was gonna seduce him in a way that she can find the strength in him, because he didn't tell anybody about his strength, right? The secret on his strength. And the Philistines were trying to capture him. They were trying to make him, you know, they were trying to capture him, or try to kill him. And we read the story many times, but they always failed because he always outsmarted them. He always overpowered them. But here comes a woman that was not very strong, right? A woman that is not very strong. A woman that didn't have an army. It was just her by herself. A woman that you can say sold herself in a way that she decided to capture Samson, but she asked the Philistines that I needed money, right? She was not going to do it for free. So the Philistines were going to pay her a lot of money. So she was going to use her cunningness, right? Her smart to capture Samson. And what happened? It worked, right? Now Samson, she sees a woman. She's like, what is she going to do to me? Nothing. Nah, she's not. I'm going to let my guard down. Next thing you know, she's all like, where's your secrets? You know, where's your strength? And first of all, he doesn't tell her right away. If we know the story, he tricks her many times, many days. You know, one of the times he tells her that if she binds him with new string ropes, then he will lose his strength. And when she says that there's a Philistine who's going to come and capture him, he rips those strings like nothing. And she's all like, why are you always lying to me? If you guys know the story, she always tells him, why are you always lying? So not only was Samson being overconfident, but he was starting to what? To lie about everything. Because he lied multiple times. Well, if you do this, well, if you do that, like playing games, right? But in the story, it tells us that he actually fell in love with her. Now it doesn't say that she fell in love with him, but he did fall in love with her. And at the end, she had enough of it, right? She had enough of him. And she told him that he was going to walk away if he didn't reveal the secret. And that's when he eventually he caved in. He told her the secret. That is, where was his strength from? His hair. Is that right? So for her to exploit that, he needed to have him completely confident in himself, right? Nothing's going to happen. You're going to be saved. And let's read right here in verse 19. In Judges chapter 16, verse 19. You guys have it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, 16, verse 19. And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called out for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he woke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as the other times before and shake myself. And he wist not, and the Lord was departed from him. But the Philistines took him, put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with feathers of brass, and he did not grind in the prison house. So what happened? Right? That she cut off his 7 dreadlocks. His strength departed from him. And then when he woke up, he tried to do the same thing as he always, right? I'm going to rely on my strength. But it says that the Lord departed from him. And they took him. And not only do they took him, what else did they do? They burned his eyes out. They took his eyes out. And they took him as a prisoner to Gaza. And we all know the story of what happens later, right? Later on, he repents. He prays to God to give him back the strength that he had. And then when the Philistines decided to put him as a trophy in front of the big palace, they chained him up in the palace where there were like 2 huge pillars. He got the strength back, and what happened? He crushed the pillars, and the whole building came down on him and his enemies. But the sad thing is that at the same time, that killed him, right? He killed himself with his enemies because he knew that there was no other way out anymore. The only way to redeem himself in front of the Lord was to fulfill what he was born, right? Deliver the people of Israel. And he said that he killed more in that day than any other time his entire time. So what do we learn from Samson, right? That he was relying too much on his strength, and at the end, not in God, right? And it didn't took armies. It didn't took a lot of men. It didn't took a lot of weapons. It just took one woman, right? One woman was able to dominate his full strength. Now, let's go to the 2nd of Kings. Maybe this is going to be maybe I don't know if you guys heard about him. But if you guys didn't hear about him, we're going to hear him today. We're going to go to 2nd of Kings chapter 5. So, you guys know about Elijah, right? So Elijah had a pupil named Elijah, and Elijah has another pupil named Gezi. So Gezi was a cunning pupil from Elijah, and we all know that. If you guys didn't know the story, right, was that there was this general named Naaman or Naaman, and that he had leprosy, and he needed to be healed. So they told him that there was a prophet in Israel that could relieve him from this disease. And you guys know what leprosy is, right? So leprosy is a really ugly disease. Your flesh starts dying and falling down. It's a very painful disease. It could take years for you to die. During that time, it was not curable. So it was extremely contagious. So if you had leprosy, then you can easily contaminate somebody else. Your whole body starts getting disfigured. Your nose falls, your ears fall. Like, it's a very sad, nasty disease. And back in the old times, if you got leprosy, they'll cast you out of the city, because they knew that it was extremely or very contagious. So you'll live outside of the city until you die, And it was, like I said, and it was not a fast death. It was a very slow, painful death, So this general had that disease, and he wanted to be cured. So they told him that there was a prophet in Israel that could give him that cureness. So he goes there. He tells him to dip himself in water 7 times. And then on the 7th time, he will be clean. And, the story goes, he does first of all, he's not very pleased from what he's told. But later on, he does it. He gets clean from leprosy. He thanks God. He goes and thanks Elijah. And then he tries to give Elijah presents, gold, expensive clothing. But Elijah says that it's not a time right now. It's not a time to be taking expensive gifts. Just go and praise God. But his servant, Geshi, he had other plans. And he's all like, well, if my master doesn't want to take the presents, then I'm going to take them. So we're going to read. We're going to read in verse 20. Yeah. Sorry, it was did I tell you guys it was chapter 5, right? All right, chapter 5 verse 20. But Gehazi, servant of Elijah, the man of God, said, behold, my master had spared Naaman this Syrian, and now receiving at his hands that which he brought. But as the Lord lived, I will run after him and take somewhat of him. So Gehazi followed after Naaman, and Naaman saw him running after him, and he lay down from the chariot to meet him, and said, is all well? And he said, all is well, my master had sent me, saying, behold, even now be come from the Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. So what's going on right here? That Gehazi, right, went chasing after Naaman to get presents, right? Not only did he try to get them, but he lied. He said that some servants came and Elijah wanted to help him out, to give him some silver and some garments, which was not true. He made that story up. He's all like, well, my master doesn't want to take no gifts from Naaman, from healing them, then I'm going to take some. But I need to make a story. I need to lie. So he made this story up, which we're reading right now. And we continue, verse 23. And Naaman said, be content, take 2 talents. And he urged him and bounded 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garments, and laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they bear them before him. And when he came to the tower, he took them from their hand and bestowed them in the house. And he let the man go, and they departed. But he went in and stood before his master, and Elijah said unto him, whence comest thou, Gehazi? O Gehazi? And he said, thy servant went no whither. So he lied again. So Elijah is telling him, so where did you go? Why were you not at the house? Oh, I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. Really? Verse 26. And he said unto him, when am my heart with thee? When the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money and to receive garments and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and maidservants? So what's going on? Elisha is telling his servant Gehazi, why you ran after Naaman and got all these gifts from him? Is it really a time to be getting luxury items? So if you don't know the story, during that time, the people of Israel were struggling a lot. They were in a war. There was a lot of poverty. There was famine. So it was not a good time in the land of Israel. A lot of people were suffering. So that's why Elijah is telling him, like, so you see all these people that are poor, all these people that are suffering, all those people that are starving, and you're going to go and buy luxury items just for yourself, and you're going to go get silver and enrich yourself when everybody is like dying around you? And then in verse 27, it says, the leprosy therefore of Naaman shall come and cleave unto thee and unto the seed forever. And he went out of his presence in leper as white as snow. So what happened at the end? He got cursed. At the end, for taking those gifts, first of all, he was greedy, right? He's all like, well, if my servant doesn't want to take the gifts, then I'm going to take them. I'm greedy. I want that stuff for myself. So he went and he asked for the items. He lied about them, right? He said that he made a story up that two servants came and they needed some money and some clothing, which he made up the story up. He lied. Third, he hid the items because he says that he hid them in the house. And then when Elijah asked him, "Where did you go?" He lied again. He said, "Oh no, I didn't go anywhere. Nothing has happened." So he made a lot of mistakes. And you must understand that this man, he was not just like any man. He was the pupil. So according to from what we read in the stories in the Bible, a lot of the prophets or judges had they had their pupils. They had people that were going to continue after them. And especially during the time of judges, they had I'm the prophet of God, and then I'm gonna pass my knowledge to somebody else because I'm gonna die eventually, right? I'm gonna get old and die, but somebody else has to carry on the message of God. So we know that Elijah, right? He went up in heaven, right, in the chariot, and he left the blessing to his servant, right? Eliezer in Spanish that's his name. So Eliezer was about to give his responsibility to this guy, Geshi or Gezi. And in Spanish is Giesi. That was going to be the next prophet of Israel. But because he failed, he lied, he was greedy, and he tried to hide what he got, no longer was he accepted in God's eyes. Not only that, but even Eliezer, he actually cursed him and his offspring forever. From being somebody that was about to be the next one in line to be a prophet, maybe we would have another book of him. Maybe he would have been the second one. But because he decided to care only about himself, that he no longer was accepted in God's eyes. So that's another reason that happened. That's another person that was, because for him to be with Elijah, I'm pretty sure he was a knowledgeable person. He knew things about God. He wasn't just some random guy. He knew. But he failed in his test. And it cost him dearly. So let's go to one last one. Let's go to the book of Samuel. Let's go to the book of Samuel, chapter 15. First one. The first book of Samuel, chapter 15. You guys have it? Okay. So this is about King Saul, the first king of Israel, and the prophet Samuel. I think we have an idea who they are, right? So when King Saul, when he started being the king of Israel, he started as a humble servant. Somebody that, first of all, he didn't want to be king. He felt like he wasn't the best at anything. But later on, as we continue with the story, right, he ends up getting more responsibilities and becoming more powerful. But then that's when he started to, you can say, he started to dwindle. He started to do mistakes. And one of the big mistakes that he did was that he started not to obey the word of God and the things that Samuel was telling him what to do. So, let's read verse 19. Wherefore then dost not obey the voice of the Lord, but didst fly upon the spoils and did evil in the sight of the Lord? So Samuel is telling him, right? He's telling Saul. And Saul said unto Samuel, yeah, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone the way which the Lord sent me, And I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took up the spoils, and the sheep, and the ox, and the chief of the things which have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God in Gilgal. So, a little backstory. So Samuel told the king Saul that he needed to destroy the Amalekites. So the Amalekites were a group of people that were very evil to the people of Israel. The Amalekites would kill the Israelis. They would actually take them hostage and slaves, especially the woman. Let's say that you have your little house. Amalekites will come in and take first of all, they'll kill everybody and take the women and children as slaves. So the Amalekites were very evil people. So when Samuel told Saul that you need to destroy these people were the completely being a burden to the people of Israel. You need to destroy them all. Not only the women and children or the man, but even the animals. You need to destroy even their animals, their sheep, their ox, everything. So, as the story goes, Samuel does that, but not entirely. He lets the king of the Amalekites, Agag, alive. And he lets all of their livestock alive. He didn't kill the sheep. And therefore, Saul says unto Samuel, yes, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. Yes, I've killed all the Amalekites, but I have brought the king of Agag, the king of the Amalekites, and the people took the sheep and the oxen, so they could do the spoils, and and they sacrifice to the Lord. So what is King Saul saying? That the people of Israel, when they were destroying the Amalekites, they took the sheep and the oxen for themselves, and they're like, well, we're going to use them as a sacrifice to the Lord. Even though Samuel told them, no, destroy everything. And this is a verse that I want you guys to pay attention right here in verse 22 when it says, and Samuel said unto the Lord, has greater delight the burnt offerings and sacrifice as in obeying the voice of the Lord? He's asking him a question. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than fat of rams. And then in verse 23, for a rebellion is as sin as witchcraft, and as stubbornness is as iniquity as idolatry. Because it has rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected thee from being king. So what happened? That Samuel is telling Saul that you really think that God cares about animals and sacrifices and the fat of rams more than obeying him? And that's when Saul couldn't understand. Saul wanted to justify his actions by saying, look, Lord, we robbed the bank. I know we did evil, but look, the money from the bank, we're going to use it for your offering. Even though the God said, don't steal, right? But look, we have money for you. So what was King Saul trying to do? He was trying to justify his action by saying, well, we're going to burn sacrifices to you. But Samuel tells him, no, God doesn't want sacrifices. God wants people to obey him and to listen to him, which is worth more than any sacrifice. And that's something that Saul didn't understand until it was too late. That's why on the verse 23, he tells Saul that being a rebellious child is like sin, it's like witchcraft. And we know that God hates witchcraft. And being stubborn, being like, I'm going to do whatever I want and nobody can tell me what to do, is iniquity of idolatry. It's almost like the sin of being idolatry. And why is that? Why is it a sin of idolatry? Because idolatry, what are you doing? You're becoming your own God. You're idolizing yourself. And that's something that God hates. God hates when we idolize ourselves. We become our own gods. We want it just about me. I only care about how I feel and me and me and me and me. And sadly enough, in this society that we live in, it's all about me, right? The music, the movies, it's all about me, me, me. And that God hates that because you're becoming an idolatry, becoming an idol. So, and at the end, what does it say? Because of this, has rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected from being king. So from that point on, God no longer accepted King Saul's kingdom. He rejected him. And we know the story, right? We know what happens later on. We know that later on, of course, King David becomes king of Israel, and he reigns over King Saul, and later King Saul dies by the hands of the Philistines. All that for not listening to God, for doing his own will, for thinking that he could do things his own way. That's why later on, let's go read the last one, and let's go to Psalms 128. Psalms 128. It's a very short song, but it talks about being obedient to God and trusting in him. Psalms 128. Blessed is everyone that followed thy Lord, that walked in his ways. For thou shalt eat the labor of thy hands. Happy shall be, and it shall be well with thee. Thy wife shall be as fruitful as vine by sides of thin house. Thy children like olive plants round about thy table. Behold, thou shalt man be blessed that fear the Lord. The Lord shall bless thee out of Zion, and thou shalt see the goodness of Jerusalem all the days of thy life. Yea, thou shalt see the children's and children, and peace upon Israel. So God is giving Israel and us a blessing that if we obey him and we follow his ways, that we will have a great house. We will have fruit-filled children. And we will have peace all the days of thy life. And we will prosper forever. If we obey what? His ways and his commandments. And that's the blessing that God, and that's the promise that God gave the people of Israel. That's why he left us all these examples so we can follow them. And, and now for us, the church, we need to take all those things to heart to do the same thing. That don't fall into our own traps, because at the end of the day, we were all humans, right? But that doesn't mean that we're like, well, we're all humans with mistakes. Yeah, I know, but at the same time, now that we know the God's will and God's word and everything, we have to be very careful of knowing our actions and our faith, because we all get scared, right? We all have that, like something so simple, we all get scared, Some people are super scared of spiders. Something very simple. I'm not scared of spiders, but maybe he is scared of spiders, Maybe somebody's scared of the dark. You're scared I'm not that scared of the dark, So it varies. We all have our weaknesses. We all have our strengths. Maybe you're faster at running than me. Maybe you can last longer than me running. Maybe you can lift stronger than me. Maybe you're more smart, in math. It could be anything. But just like we all have our weaknesses and our strengths, and God knows that, it also can become our undoing. Can also become our biggest weakness. Our strengths, what did they say? That our strengths are also can become our what? Our biggest weaknesses. And that's usually what happens. Yeah. Just like I was telling you guys the story when I was running, right? I'm like, oh yeah, I can run fast. And I was beating everybody, but then half out of the way, I started to panic and, I almost fell to the ground. I crashed. But there was another kid that was faster, and he was like whatever. He ran faster all the time, and I always wanted to beat him, but I was never able to because he was just taller and more athletic, I guess. But the point is that let's not rely on our own strengths, right? Let's rely on God and let Him guide us forever. Amen. Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming, and let's stand up and pray, and thank God for today. Dear Lord, I bless, Lord, that today you give us more wisdom, more strength in our lives, that you keep lifting our spirits every day because we need it, Lord. That our strengths, that you give us more of our strengths, Lord, each one of us. And also, Lord, protect us from our weaknesses, which we all have our weaknesses, Lord. Let our weaknesses not make us fall all the time, Lord. You know that in this world, there's a lot of barriers, a lot of things in this world that can make us trip and fall. But if we do trip and fall, please, Lord, I pray that you lift us up and give us more each strength and more wisdom every day. That we keep growing more in your word, becoming very smart man and woman, so we can continue helping other people that are in suffering, other people that need the help, Lord. And that we can become united also and be with you, Lord, one day. That you keep giving us the wisdom and strength, Lord. I pray that that we all keep carrying this in ourselves and our hearts, and wherever we go, wherever we be, in school, at work, in our car, anywhere, that you keep guiding us through life and every single day, Lord. And I pray in your holy